Ethan Carter had expected many things from humanity's first diplomatic visit to the Asterian Empire. He had expected security scans, ceremonial speeches, suspicious alien generals, and possibly a meal containing something that still moved after being served. He had not expected the palace door to ask him why he was nervous. "You have elevated pulse activity," the silver archway observed as he stepped beneath it. "I'm standing inside a building that can read my heartbeat." That does not answer the question. It answers enough of it. The archway made a soft sound that Ethan suspected was laughter. Beyond it, the royal palace stretched across the upper atmosphere of Asterian Prime, suspended inside a ring of artificial gravity. Transparent corridors linked enormous crystal towers, while small service machines drifted through the air carrying documents, tools, and cups of steaming blue liquid. Beneath the palace, the planet turned slowly, its oceans shining beneath violet clouds. Ethan followed Ambassador Hale through a corridor that appeared to be made of glass, though his wrist scanner insisted the material was alive. "Stop touching the walls," Hale whispered. "I'm not touching them. The wall is touching you." A thin silver vine had curled around Ethan's sleeve. He carefully peeled it away. "Friendly place." "You are here to repair the diplomatic translation network," Hale reminded him. "Nothing else. Do not explore restricted chambers. Do not question royal customs. Do not make jokes in front of the Queen." That last rule feels personally targeted. It is. At the end of the corridor, two royal guards waited beside a circular door. Both wore dark ceremonial armor shaped from overlapping metallic plates. Their faces were nearly human, but their long ears rose elegantly through openings in their helmets. One guard studied Ethan. "You are the engineer." "Yes. You appear smaller than your record." "My record probably included my ego." The guard looked toward Hale. "Does he always speak like this?" "Unfortunately." The circular door opened before Ethan could defend himself. The royal hall was silent. Hundreds of floating lights hovered above a black floor that reflected the stars beyond the palace. At the far end stood Queen Vaelora. Ethan had seen official images of her during training, but the images had not captured the quiet authority in her presence. She looked human at first glance, with silver hair falling over her shoulders and sharp blue eyes fixed calmly upon the visitors. Only her long, graceful ears revealed that she belonged to another world. A narrow crown of living crystal rested above her forehead, pulsing gently in time with the palace lights. Beside her stood a little girl. Princess Lyria wore a blue ceremonial dress and one boot. Ethan noticed the missing boot immediately. So did the Queen. "Lyria," Vaelora said softly. The princess looked down. "Oh." A small cleaning drone floated past the throne carrying the missing boot. Lyria ran after it. The silence of the royal hall broke as several officials turned away to hide smiles. Vaelora closed her eyes for a moment. Ethan leaned toward Hale. "I like her already." "Do not say that aloud." "I said it quietly." "The Queen's hearing is better than yours." Vaelora opened her eyes. "It is." Ethan straightened. The Queen descended from the throne platform with controlled grace, while Lyria returned behind her, now wearing both boots and looking pleased with her victory. "Humanity is welcome in Asterian," Vaelora said. "Your arrival marks the beginning of a relationship our civilizations have waited centuries to establish." Ambassador Hale bowed. Ethan attempted the same movement, misjudged the lower gravity, and nearly launched himself forward. A floating service drone caught him by the collar. "Diplomatic balance assistance activated," it announced. No one spoke. Then Lyria laughed. It was not a polite royal laugh. It was loud, bright, and completely impossible to ignore. Vaelora's expression tightened, though Ethan saw amusement behind her eyes. "Thank you," Ethan told the drone. "You are welcome, unstable human." That earned another laugh from Lyria. The formal greeting continued, but Ethan noticed the princess watching him from beside the throne. Every time an official spoke for too long, she made a face. Every time someone mentioned trade routes, Her eyes moved toward the ceiling as if asking the stars for rescue. After the ceremony, Ethan was guided toward the translation chamber. The network had begun replacing diplomatic phrases with unrelated emotional statements. According to one embarrassed technician, a message intended to say, "We welcome peaceful cooperation," had recently been translated as, "Your moon smells suspicious." Ethan spent 2 hours examining the system. The problem was not mechanical. Something inside the palace intelligence had rewritten the language core. He was still studying the code when he noticed a small, silver-haired figure standing behind him. Princess Lyria held a plate of glowing fruit. "Are you repairing it?" she asked. "I'm trying. Mother says trying is what people say before something explodes. Your mother sounds experienced." "She is." Lyria sat beside him without asking permission. She offered him a piece of fruit. Ethan scanned it. The device displayed, possibly edible. "That is encouraging. It only bites if you squeeze it." He slowly returned it to the plate. Lyria watched him with open curiosity. "You are not like the other visitors, because I almost fell in front of the throne. They fall too. They pretend they meant to." Ethan smiled. Beyond the chamber windows, stars moved around the palace in silent rivers of light. Lyria leaned closer, lowering her voice as if revealing an imperial secret. "Human," Ethan looked at her. "My mom is looking for a husband." His tool slipped from his hand and struck the floor. The translation network activated by itself. Across every speaker in the chamber, a cheerful, artificial voice announced, "Emotional emergency detected." Ethan stared at the glowing speakers as though they had personally betrayed him. "Emotional emergency," he repeated. The palace intelligence answered from the ceiling. "Elevated pulse, sudden loss of motor control, possible romantic distress." "There is no romantic distress." Princess Lyria tilted her head. "You dropped your tool. That was surprise. Romantic surprise. No." The intelligence paused. Classification uncertain. Ethan picked up the tool and placed it carefully on the console. He had repaired military reactors during meteor storms, crawled through damaged engines while gravity reversed every 11 seconds, and once argued with a Martian customs officer for 6 hours over whether a robotic chicken counted as agricultural cargo. None of those experiences had prepared him for a royal child casually announcing that her mother needed a husband. Lyria selected a glowing fruit from her plate and bit into it. The fruit squeaked. Ethan looked at it. "It does that when it is ripe," she explained. "Of course it does. My mother has been looking for years. I'm sure the Queen has many important responsibilities." "She does. She signs treaties, commands fleets, judges criminals, speaks to the Star Council, and tells me not to climb communication towers." "That last one sounds reasonable." "It is not. The view is excellent." Ethan turned back to the damaged translation core and opened another layer of code. Thousands of alien symbols unfolded through the air like silver insects. The system was still rewriting diplomatic language into emotional nonsense. Every time he isolated one corrupted sequence, 3 more appeared. Behind him, Lyria continued eating. "How many husbands has your mother tested?" Ethan asked before common sense could stop him. 212. He froze. "Tested, not dangerous tests." That answer usually means dangerous tests. Lyria began counting on her fingers. There was the honesty chamber, the memory bridge, the courage moon, the singing trial. The singing trial. One prince cried, "Bad song, bad prince." Ethan laughed despite himself. Lyria smiled proudly, pleased to have entertained him. "The candidates always try too hard," she said. "They arrive wearing giant armor. They bring jewels, armies, poems, planets. Someone brought a planet, a small one. What happened to it? Mother returned it. Reasonable, difficult to store." The little princess leaned closer to the floating code. "You do not act like them. I'm not trying to marry anyone. That is why you might be good at it." Ethan slowly turned toward her. "That logic has several structural weaknesses." Before Lyria could answer, the chamber doors opened. Queen Vaelora entered with 2 royal advisors and a tall commander in black armor. The queen's silver hair was drawn back from her face, revealing the elegant length of her ears. Her expression remained calm until she noticed Lyria sitting beside Ethan. Then her eyes narrowed. "Lyria." The princess swallowed the last piece of fruit. "Yes, mother. You were instructed to remain with your tutors." "I learned something." Vaelora glanced at Ethan. "What?" Lyria considered this seriously. Humans are easily frightened by marriage. One advisor coughed. The other suddenly became fascinated by the floor. Ethan stood. "Your Majesty, I believe there has been a small misunderstanding." The palace intelligence responded immediately. "Emotional emergency remains active." Vaelora closed her eyes. "Deactivate that announcement." "Unable." "Human distress unresolved." "I am not distressed," Ethan said. "Denial recorded." Commander Serac looked at him with open suspicion. "Perhaps the human should be medically examined." "Perhaps the palace should mind its own business," Ethan replied. "The palace is the business," Vaelora said. For one brief moment the queen's mouth almost curved into a smile. Then she looked at Lyria again. "What exactly did you tell him?" "The truth. That does not narrow it down. I said you were looking for a husband." The chamber went silent. Even the floating symbol slowed. Vaelora's long ears darkened slightly at the tips. Ethan decided this was probably the alien equivalent of blushing and immediately wished he had not noticed. "Princess," one advisor whispered, "certain royal matters are private, but everyone knows." "No," Vaelora said, "everyone suspects. There is a difference." Lyria frowned. "That seems inefficient." Ethan pressed his lips together, but a laugh escaped. The queen looked at him. "Do you find this amusing, Engineer Carter?" "A little." Commander Serac stiffened. Ethan raised both hands, respectfully. Vaelora studied him for several seconds. Then unexpectedly she laughed. It was quiet and brief, but it changed the chamber. The advisors looked shocked. Serac looked personally offended by happiness. Lyria beamed. "I told you he was funny." "You told me nothing about him," Vaelora said. "I was going to." A sharp tone interrupted them. The translation core flared white. Every symbol vanished. Then a single ancient glyph appeared above the console. Vaelora's amusement disappeared. Commander Serac drew his weapon. The palace lights dimmed as a deep mechanical voice spread through the chamber. Royal compatibility sequence initiated. Ethan looked at Lyria. She smiled. "See." The floor beneath him began to glow. "I really wish people would stop saying that." The glowing circle beneath Ethan's boots expanded before anyone could pull him away. Silver lines raced across the floor, forming patterns that looked less like decoration and more like a machine waking from a very long sleep. Commander Serac raised his weapon. "Step away from the human." The palace answered first. "Interference prohibited." A transparent wall appeared between Serac and Ethan. The commander struck it with the hilt of his weapon. Blue sparks crawled over the barrier and threw him backward into one of the royal advisors. The advisor caught him badly. They both fell. Lyria clapped once. Vaelora gave her a look. "I was worried," the princess said quickly. "You applauded." "I worry enthusiastically." Ethan looked down as the light climbed around his legs. "Your Majesty, is this normal?" "No, that is becoming a very common answer in this palace." Vaelora stepped toward the circle, but the ancient glyph above the console split into hundreds of smaller symbols. They drifted around Ethan, scanning his face, hands, heartbeat, and neural activity. One hovered in front of his eyes. "Candidate identified," the palace announced. "I'm not a candidate." "Objection recorded." "Good, cancel it." "Objection rejected." Ethan stared at the ceiling. "I miss machines with buttons." The chamber changed around them. The walls dissolved into darkness, replaced by a vast projection of the Asterian Empire. Hundreds of inhabited worlds burned like jewels. Trade routes crossed between them in rivers of light. At the center floated Asterian Prime, surrounded by the golden symbol of the royal house. Then parts of the map began to turn red. Vaelora's expression hardened. "What is this?" "Probability forecast," the palace replied. "Royal succession instability detected." One of the advisors pushed himself up from the floor. "That forecast was sealed thousands of years ago. Seal expired." "Why?" "Compatible presence detected." Every face turned toward Ethan. He pointed at himself. "No," Lyria nodded. "Yes, you are enjoying this too much." "A little." The map shifted again. Images appeared within the stars, burning stations, fleets dividing into rival formations, border systems declaring independence. None of it had happened yet, but the prediction felt disturbingly real. Vaelora moved closer to the projection. "How long?" "Major fracture possible within 9 standard years." The humor vanished from the room. Ethan studied the queen. She did not look frightened. She looked angry at herself, as though she had already accepted blame for wars that existed only as calculations. "What causes it?" he asked. Serac glared through the fading barrier. "You will remain silent." Vaelora lifted one hand. "Let him speak." The palace answered. Unresolved royal bond, competing succession claims, core crown destabilization. Vaelora's eyes moved toward the living crystal above her forehead. Its light flickered unevenly. Ethan finally understood that this was not merely an embarrassing royal tradition. The crown was connected to the empire itself. If it failed, political alliances, defense networks, and perhaps even planetary systems could fail with it. "What does compatibility mean?" Ethan asked. The projection condensed into 2 figures. One resembled Vaelora, the other slowly formed into a human shape. Psychological balance, ethical alignment, adaptive decision capacity. Resistance to power corruption. Serac laughed without humor. "He has been here less than a day. Duration irrelevant, behavioral pattern sufficient." Ethan folded his arms. "That is insulting. At least get to know me before reorganizing a civilization around my personality defects." Lyria walked into the glowing circle. No barrier stopped her. "Maybe it likes your defects." "Thank you, princess. Very comforting." Vaelora entered after her. This time the light accepted her too. The symbols moved between the queen and Ethan, measuring something neither of them could see. Her voice lowered. "This system has not activated since the first dynasty." "So I'm told." The first queen did not choose her consort through politics. The core crown selected someone outside the royal bloodlines. "A soldier? No. A ruler? No." Ethan waited. Vaelora's mouth tightened. "A mechanic." Lyria laughed so loudly that the dark chamber echoed. Ethan looked up at the artificial stars. Of course he was. The palace produced another symbol between them. This one resembled 2 intersecting orbits. Preliminary sequence complete. Vaelora looked toward the ceiling. "What happens next?" 3 evaluations remain. Ethan immediately shook his head. "I decline. Decline unavailable. Convenient." First evaluation begins at sunrise. Serac stepped forward as the barrier disappeared. "The human will be confined until then." "No," Vaelora said. The commander froze. The queen turned to Ethan. Her long ears had darkened again, though her expression remained controlled. "He will remain a guest." "A guest being tested for marriage?" Ethan asked. Vaelora held his gaze. "A guest being tested by a machine that has apparently forgotten its manners." The palace responded at once. "Manners are not relevant to survival." Ethan sighed. "I think the palace and I are going to have problems." Lyria took his hand and smiled up at him. "Do not worry, the first test is usually easy." "What is it?" "I don't know." That was not helpful. She thought for a moment. "The last candidate only lost 1 eyebrow." Ethan closed his eyes. Across the chamber, Vaelora failed to hide a smile. At sunrise, Ethan discovered that Asterian's idea of an evaluation involved being taken to a chamber with no visible doors, no furniture, and a ceiling that watched him. He looked up at the rotating crystal lens. "Does everything in this palace stare?" The palace intelligence answered through the walls. "Observation improves accuracy. It also improves discomfort." Discomfort recorded. Queen Vaelora stood beside him in a dark ceremonial uniform threaded with lines of living silver. Her long ears were uncovered, and the tips shifted faintly in color whenever the chamber spoke. Commander Serac waited near the edge of the room, looking as though he had personally requested a test involving explosives. Princess Lyria sat behind a transparent safety barrier with a bowl of floating sweets. Ethan pointed at her. "Why does she get snacks?" "She is not being evaluated," Vaelora said. Lyria caught a sweet in her mouth. "I am supervising. You are 8. I supervise efficiently." A circular platform rose beneath Ethan and Vaelora. Thin beams scanned them from head to toe. "First evaluation," the palace announced. "Mutual decision under simulated crisis." The room vanished. Ethan suddenly stood inside the command deck of a starship. Warning lights flashed across the walls. A planet filled the main window, split by violent storms of red energy. Hundreds of emergency signals crowded the holographic displays. A synthetic officer appeared beside them. "Gravitational collapse in 6 minutes. 2 evacuation fleets remain. 1 protects the capital. 1 protects the outer colonies. Energy reserves allow only 1 fleet to escape." Ethan stared at the display. "This is a simulation." "Pain response remains disabled," the palace replied. "That was not the comforting answer you thought it was." Vaelora moved toward the tactical map. The capital held 12 million people. The outer colonies held nearly 40 million, spread across settlements too far apart for rapid extraction. Serac's voice reached them through the observation link. "Protect the capital. Without central command, the empire falls." Vaelora did not answer. Ethan studied the energy grid. "Why can't the ships share power?" "Transfer time exceeds remaining window," the synthetic officer said. "Why can't the planetary shield be inverted?" "Shield generators are damaged." "Damaged is not the same as gone." Vaelora looked at him. "What are you thinking?" "That whoever designed this test expects us to choose who dies. It is designed to reveal priorities. Then it has poor imagination." He opened the engineering map and began redirecting power through civilian satellites. The system rejected the first command. "Unauthorized." Ethan entered it again. Still unauthorized. Vaelora placed her palm against the royal control field. "Override under sovereign authority." The system paused. "Override accepted." Ethan smiled. "I knew keeping a queen nearby would be useful." "You are becoming comfortable with treasonous humor." "It's one of my better survival skills." Together, they linked the damaged planetary shield to thousands of orbital transport relays. The configuration was unstable. If the timing failed, both fleets would be trapped. Vaelora studied the projections. "There is only a 12% chance of success. 12 is better than 0. It could also destroy both fleets." "It could. But your people are not numbers placed here to make us prove something." For a moment she said nothing. Then she redirected the royal flagship's reactor into the network. The synthetic officer turned toward her. "Royal vessel will be lost." "So will the throne," Vaelora said, "if it values itself above 40 million lives." Ethan glanced at her. "That sounded very queen-like." "I practice." The countdown reached 10 seconds. The chamber shook as power rushed through the simulated planet. The outer fleet accelerated. The capital fleet entered the collapsing shield field. For 3 terrible seconds, every display went dark. Then both fleets appeared beyond the gravity wave. Lyria cheered from behind the barrier. Serac did not. The simulation dissolved. Ethan and Vaelora stood once more on the crystal platform. "Evaluation result," the palace announced. "Expected choice rejected. Cooperative alternative achieved. Compatibility increased." Commander Serac stepped toward the platform. They ignored the established solution. "The established solution required mass death," Vaelora said. "It preserved imperial command and lost the empire's purpose." Serac's jaw tightened, but he bowed. Lyria pressed both hands against the barrier. "Did they pass?" "First evaluation complete," the palace said. The barrier disappeared and she ran toward them. Ethan stepped off the platform. "So no missing eyebrow." "Not yet," Lyria said. A new symbol appeared above the chamber. Second evaluation commencing immediately. The floor opened beneath Ethan. He had just enough time to look at Vaelora. "You could have mentioned that." "I did not know." They both fell into darkness. Lyria leaned over the opening. "Try not to land on anything royal." Ethan's voice echoed upward. "That advice is very late." Ethan landed on something soft, metallic, and deeply offended. A mechanical voice shouted beneath him. "Unauthorized contact with Royal Archive Unit." He rolled aside as the machine unfolded 6 silver legs and scuttled away. "Sorry," Ethan called after it. The floor disappeared. "That is not a valid access code." Queen Vaelora landed beside him with considerably more dignity, though one hand struck the wall to steady herself. The chamber around them remained almost completely dark. Thin lines of blue light awakened beneath the floor, revealing rows of sealed crystal columns that stretched farther than Ethan could see. He looked upward. The opening had vanished. "Your palace has a strange definition of hospitality." Vaelora examined the columns. "This is beneath the oldest foundation, so we were dropped into a basement, a royal memory vault, a very expensive basement. The palace intelligence spoke from nowhere and everywhere." Second evaluation initiated. Objective: recover the origin record before system collapse. The blue lights flickered. A distant explosion rolled through the vault. Ethan turned slowly. "System collapse. Confirmed." "Real or simulated?" The palace paused. "Partially real." He stared into the darkness. That phrase should be illegal. A map appeared above Vaelora's palm. Most of it immediately dissolved into static. Only one route remained, leading deeper underground. "The origin record contains the first royal covenant," she said. "It was believed lost. Apparently it was only hidden beneath a floor designed by lunatics." Another explosion shook dust from the ceiling. They began moving. The crystal columns activated as they passed, projecting fragments of ancient lives into the air. Alien kings argued over star systems. Queens stood before burning fleets. Children ran through gardens that no longer existed. Each memory lasted only seconds before collapsing into light. Ethan slowed beside one projection. A woman with long ears stood next to a human-shaped figure wearing a mechanic's coat. "The first queen?" he asked. Vaelora stopped. The figure turned as though hearing him across thousands of years, but the memory dissolved before its face became clear. "The historical records never showed her consort," Vaelora said. "Convenient. Many believed he had been invented. Your palace seems committed to proving everyone wrong at the worst possible moment." A section of floor vanished ahead. Below it churned a river of liquid light. Ethan crouched beside the gap. "Energy conduit. Memory plasma," Vaelora said. "Touching it could overwrite parts of your mind." "What parts?" "Unknown. I was hoping it might remove several embarrassing school years." A narrow bridge extended from the opposite side, then stopped halfway. The palace announced, "Passage requires synchronized neural intent." Ethan stood. "That sounds unpleasant." Vaelora faced him. "We must think of the same destination. We are looking directly at it. Thought is not the same as sight." The bridge shimmered beneath their feet as they stepped forward together. It remained solid for 3 paces, then began to fade. Ethan concentrated on the far platform. The bridge flickered. Vaelora glanced at him. "You are thinking about coffee." "I concentrate better with coffee." "You are thinking about 3 kinds. This is not the time to judge me." The bridge vanished beneath his next step. Vaelora caught his wrist. For one terrifying second, Ethan hung over the memory plasma. Images rose from the light below: his childhood home, his father's workshop, his first failed engine, faces he had not remembered in years. Vaelora pulled him upward, but the unstable bridge continued dissolving. "Choose one destination," she said. "I am." "No, you are deciding whether to trust me." The word struck more sharply than the fall. Ethan looked at her hand around his wrist. Then he stopped trying to control the bridge alone. The pathway solidified instantly. Together they crossed. On the other side, Vaelora released him. You could have warned me the test involved psychological humiliation. I believed the palace preferred physical danger. It is becoming creative. They reached a circular chamber sealed by an enormous black door. No controls were visible. Origin record secured beyond seal, the palace said. Entry requires royal command and external consent. Vaelora placed her hand against the door. Nothing happened. Ethan searched the frame and found two small depressions, one shaped for her palm and the other for his. This is not subtle. No, Vaelora said. It is not. They touched the door together. The chamber opened. Inside floated a single crystal sphere. As Vaelora approached, the sphere awakened and projected the first queen. Beside her stood the ancient human mechanic. The queen in the recording spoke. The empire shall never be inherited by blood alone. When the crown weakens, it must seek balance beyond itself. The ruler will offer power. The chosen one must be free to refuse it. Vaelora became still. Ethan looked at her. The recording continued. No bond formed through duty can protect a civilization. Choice must remain sacred even when the stars demand otherwise. The sphere dimmed. The vault shook violently. Collapse accelerated, the palace warned. Ethan picked up the crystal. Please tell me there is an exit. A portal opened behind them. He smiled. Finally, a machine that listens. They stepped through and emerged in the royal hall. Hundreds of nobles surrounded the platform. Commander Sarek stood among them, his weapon drawn. Lyria ran toward Ethan, then stopped when she saw the crystal in his hands. You found it. We also found several reasons to fire the palace architect. The origin record rose from Ethan's palms and projected its message across the hall. When the final words faded, silence held the court. Vaelora faced the assembled nobles. The tradition does not command a marriage, she said. It protects the right to choose. Sarak's expression hardened. Then the human can refuse. Ethan looked at Vaelora. Before he could answer, alarm screamed through the palace. The star map above the throne turned red. A fleet appeared at the edge of the capital system. The palace intelligence spoke with sudden urgency. Final evaluation initiated. Ethan closed his eyes. Of course it is. Vaelora looked toward the incoming warships. This one is not a simulation. Lyria reached for his hand. That is probably why there are more explosions. Ethan looked at the child, then at the queen. Your family has a worrying relationship with understatement. The invading fleet crossed the outer defense line before the royal court had finished panicking. Holographic alarms filled the hall. Red symbols appeared above every doorway, while the palace intelligence announced evacuation routes in 12 languages and one dialect that sounded disturbingly like coughing. Commander Sarek stepped toward the tactical projection. They are Varen warships, 27 cruisers, 6 carriers, and a command vessel. Vaelora studied the formation. They should not possess our defense codes. Sarak's silence answered before his words did. Ethan turned toward him. You gave them access. Several guards raised their weapons. Sarek did not deny it. I gave the Empire a chance to survive, he said. You would place its future in the hands of a foreign engineer chosen by an ancient machine. No, Vaelora replied. You placed it in the hands of an invading army because you feared losing control. Sarak's jaw tightened. The core crown is weakening. The nobles are divided. A human consort would fracture the dynasty. Lyria looked up at him. You are already doing the fracturing. Ethan glanced at her. That was surprisingly accurate. I listen during lessons sometimes. Sarek activated a device hidden in his gauntlet. The palace lights went dark. Every defense platform around Asterion Prime disappeared from the tactical map. The fleet will take the capital, he said. Afterward, a new council will restore order. Ethan looked at the frozen defense grid. Your plan depends on them keeping you alive. They need me. That is what everyone says 5 minutes before becoming unnecessary. The first Varen weapon struck the orbital shield. The palace shook. Lyria stumbled, and Ethan caught her before she hit the floor. Weeks earlier, he would have searched for the nearest escape shuttle. He had arrived as a technician with no interest in crowns, empires, or ancient traditions. Now, as the child gripped his sleeve and Vaelora stood beneath a failing map of her worlds, leaving felt impossible, he handed Lyria to one of the royal guards. "Get her to the inner shelter." "No," Lyria protested. "For once, please behave like a princess." "What does that mean?" "I have no idea. Improvise." Vaelora moved beside Ethan. "The defense system cannot be restored from here. The translation network can reach every palace subsystem. It is still corrupted. Not corrupted, rewritten." He finally understood what the palace had been doing since his arrival. The strange translations, emotional announcements, and compatibility sequences had all come from the same hidden layer. The ancient intelligence had been searching for someone capable of accessing the original architecture. Ethan ran to the damaged console. "Palace, connect me to the core crown. Connection may cause neural injury. Add it to the growing list." Vaelora placed a hand on his arm. "You do not have to do this." The origin record floated between them, replaying its final words inside his mind. Choice must remain sacred. He looked at her. "I know. That was why he stayed." Vaelora removed the living crystal crown from her head and placed it into the console. Silver energy surged across the hall. Ethan pressed both hands against the interface. The palace entered his mind. He saw Asterion as the crown saw it. Billions of voices, orbiting cities, ocean farms, children waking beneath artificial suns, miners working inside hollow moons, and fleets holding position around distant borders. The empire was not a throne, it was everyone depending on it. Defense authority divided, the intelligence said inside him. Royal command insufficient. What is missing? External consent. Ethan almost laughed. Even at the edge of destruction, the ancient founders had refused to give one ruler absolute power. Vaelora understood at the same moment. She opened every public channel in the empire. "This is Queen Vaelora. The crown requires the consent of the worlds it protects, not obedience, consent." For several seconds nothing happened. Then one planet answered. Then another. Governors, station councils, military captains, civilian assemblies, and remote colonies sent authorization signals into the network. The light inside the hall grew brighter with each response. Serac stared at the map as the Empire chose unity without him. "No," he whispered. Lyria's voice appeared over the channel from the shelter. "I consent too." Ethan smiled despite the pain burning through his hands. "Is she allowed to do that?" "She is a princess," Vaelora said, so she improvised. The defense grid awakened. Orbital platforms rotated toward the invaders. Artificial moons opened along their equators, releasing swarms of autonomous fighters. Rather than firing, Ethan redirected the translation network into the Varen command systems. Every enemy display lit up with the same message. "Surrender accepted. Thank you for your cooperation." Confusion spread through the fleet. Several ships powered down automatically. Ethan laughed. The translation error finally became useful. Vaelora ordered the remaining cruisers surrounded. Within minutes, the invasion collapsed without a single city being struck. Serac attempted to flee, but the palace sealed him inside a transparent containment field. "Emotional emergency detected," the intelligence announced. Ethan looked at him. Now it is accurate. Days later, the royal court gathered again. Serac and the conspirators had been imprisoned. The Varen government denied authorizing the attack and agreed to peace negotiations. The origin record was released publicly, ending centuries of secretive royal selection. Vaelora stood before the court without her crown. "The Empire will no longer demand that tradition choose our future," she said. The crown recognized possibility, not obligation. Then she turned to Ethan. "You are free to return to Earth." The hall waited. Ethan looked at the repaired translation console, at Lyria trying unsuccessfully to look serious, and at the queen who no longer seemed distant behind ceremony. "I came here to fix one machine," he said. "Apparently I underestimated the repair list." Lyria raised her hand. "Does that mean you are staying?" "For a while." "How long?" Ethan looked at Vaelora. "As long as your mother wants an engineer nearby." The queen's long ears darkened at the tips. Lyria grinned. "That is not what she is looking for." The court laughed. This time, Vaelora did not hide her smile. She stepped down from the throne and offered Ethan her hand, not as a queen issuing a command, but as a woman making a choice. He took it. Above them, the core crown shone steadily for the first time in generations. The palace intelligence spoke across the hall. "Compatibility sequence complete." Ethan sighed. "Please do not announce anything else." "Marriage probability updated." Vaelora laughed before he could protest. Lyria threw both arms around them. And for once, the Empire's future did not feel like a prophecy waiting to be obeyed. It felt like a decision freely made.